Stranger in Red. Chapter 1. A White Christmas. The snowstorm hit harder than anyone had predicted. Outside the Warner family's cozy lakeside home, Lake Michigan was obscured by sheets of snow that swirled in the icy wind. Inside, however, the atmosphere was warm and festive. Twinkling lights adorned the Christmas tree, the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air, and laughter echoed as the large family exchanged stories and gifts. "It's shaping up to be a perfect Christmas," Margaret Warner said, adjusting the ribbon on a present. Her husband Peter nodded, sipping mulled wine. Their 4 children, along with Peter's brother, his wife, and their 2 kids, made the house feel lively and full. Even the family dog, an old golden retriever named Buddy, seemed unusually playful. The clock struck 9 when the first knock came. It was faint, almost drowned out by the howling wind. Everyone froze, exchanging puzzled looks. "Who on earth would be out in this weather?" Peter muttered, rising to his feet. The family followed him to the front door. He opened it cautiously, letting a gust of icy air rush in. Standing on the snow-covered porch was a man dressed as Santa Claus, his red suit dusted with frost. "Merry Christmas," the man said, his voice deep and warm. "I got caught in the storm. Could I trouble you for shelter?" The family hesitated. He looked harmless enough, though his face was mostly obscured by a thick white beard and the shadow of his hat. "We can't leave him out there," Margaret said softly. Peter nodded and stepped aside. "Come in. You must be freezing." As the stranger entered, the lights flickered ominously, and a chill seemed to follow him into the room. Chapter 2. Welcome Santa. The man, or Santa, as the children quickly dubbed him, settled by the fireplace, rubbing his hands together to warm them. Margaret brought him a mug of hot cocoa, which he accepted with a polite nod. "Thank you for your kindness," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "The storm caught me by surprise. My sleigh got stuck a few miles back." The adults chuckled nervously, while the children bombarded him with questions. "Are you the real Santa?" asked little Timmy, clutching a stuffed reindeer. The man smiled, his teeth oddly bright. "What do you think?" As the evening wore on, the family tried to include their unexpected guest in the festivities. He was polite but evasive, skillfully dodging questions about where he had come from or why he was out in the storm. The children adored him, but the adults exchanged uneasy glances. There was something off about him, something they couldn't quite put their finger on. Then strange things began to happen. Timmy's toy train, which had been turned off, suddenly started moving on its own. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 13 times, though it hadn't worked in years. The family heirloom, a porcelain angel that had been on the mantel for decades, crashed to the floor without explanation. When Margaret asked the stranger for his name, he simply said, "Call me Saint Nick," and smiled. At that moment, the fire in the hearth extinguished itself, plunging the room into darkness. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Storm. "Must be the wind," Peter said, though his voice was unsteady. He relit the fire while Margaret fetched candles. The snowstorm outside intensified, and the power went out completely, leaving the house bathed in the dim, flickering glow of candlelight. The children, oblivious to the tension, fell asleep on the couches, but the adults stayed up, their unease growing. They heard faint creaks and whispers from upstairs, but when Peter investigated, he found nothing. The stranger, meanwhile, sat in an armchair by the window, staring out at the storm. "You have a lovely family," he said, his tone pleasant but unnervingly flat. "So much love under one roof." "Thank you," Margaret replied, forcing a smile. "Cherish it," he added, his gaze never leaving the window. "You never know how quickly it can all slip away." Peter cleared his throat. "So, Saint Nick, what's your plan once the storm clears?" The stranger turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "That depends. What do you believe?" Before Peter could respond, a loud crash echoed from the basement. It was followed by heavy, deliberate footsteps ascending the stairs. Chapter 4. The Truth Unravels. Peter grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the basement door, the rest of the family close behind. He flung it open, shining the light down the stairs. Nothing. The basement was empty. It must have been the wind, Margaret said, though no one believed her. When they returned to the living room, they found the walls smeared with strange, soot-like markings. The words were jagged and chaotic, written in a language none of them recognized. The stranger, still seated by the window, seemed unfazed. "What is this?" Peter demanded. The stranger's smile returned, colder this time. "Some things are better left unexplored. I'd suggest you all stay together." The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Old grievances bubbled to the surface, and the family began arguing. Accusations flew and voices rose. Meanwhile, the stranger watched, a faint smile playing on his lips. Then, without warning, one of the family members, Peter's brother Mark, was gone. His chair was empty, his drink still warm. "Where is he?" Margaret cried. The stranger shrugged. "Sometimes sacrifices must be made." Chapter 5: The Darkest Hour. Panic set in as the family searched the house, calling Mark's name. The room seemed to stretch and twist, becoming unfamiliar. The temperature dropped further, their breaths visible in the flickering candlelight. The stranger remained in the living room, humming an old Christmas tune. When Peter confronted him, demanding answers, the stranger only said, "You invited me in. Whatever happens now is on you." The family regrouped in the living room, their fear turning to desperation. Someone suggested tying up the stranger, but he laughed. "Go ahead, see what it changes." As they argued, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. It was Mark's voice, and then silence. Chapter 6: A Red Christmas. Gathering whatever weapons they could find, a fireplace poker, a kitchen knife, the family prepared to confront the stranger. But when they turned to face him, he was gone. The lights flickered back on for a brief moment, revealing Mark lying motionless on the floor. The stranger stood over him, his hands stained with blood. The lights went out again, plunging the house into chaos. In the darkness, screams and scuffles echoed. When the power returned, the stranger lay dead, a knife buried in his chest. The family stood around him, each of them insisting they hadn't done it. As they stared at the lifeless body, the snowstorm abruptly stopped. The family ventured outside, but there were no footprints leading to or away from the house. Hours later, the police arrived. An officer examined the scene, shaking his head. "Strangest thing, every house in town got a visit from Santa tonight, but this is the only one where he didn't leave alive."